Hello and welcome to Canvas, the Niger Delta Roundtable. Every week we discuss the future of this region, blessed humongously with hydrocarbon resources. We give time to reflecting on topics relevant to the development of the Niger Delta and her people. This episode, no different. I'm here once again. We're focusing on how to take our region to a more promising future. This podcast is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC Renaissance Total Energies Ajib joint venture, Renaissance Africa Energy Company Limited, headquartered in Port Harcourt. Thanks for joining. I'm Adedayo Ilushakin. Our topic for this episode, the art of reclaiming the Niger Delta. What happens when an artist picks up a brush, not just to paint, but to reclaim history? In this episode, we journey into the world of a Port Harcourt-born artist whose exhibitions reimagines the life and legacy of King Jaja of Opobo through vivid portraiture, sculptural installations, and a deep engagement with Niger Delta heritage, whose work challenges colonial narratives and celebrates indigenous resistance. But beyond the canvas lies a bigger question. Can art help us rebuild identity, inspire development, and shape the future of a region long defined by struggle? This is the art of reclaiming the Niger Delta, a conversation about creativity, courage, and the power of storytelling to transform society. Again, the topic for this episode is the art of reclaiming the Niger Delta, and my guest is Ibim Cookey. Ibim Cookey is a multidisciplinary Nigerian artist from Port Harcourt whose work blends historical narrative, cultural identity, and architectural form. His debut solo exhibition, King Jaja, explores the life and resistance of King Jaja of Opobo, reclaiming a suppressed chapter of Niger Delta history through vivid portraiture and sculptural installations. Cookey's work has been showcased globally, from Lagos and London to Miami, Athens, and Cape Town, earning him recognition as one of Nigeria's most compelling contemporary voices in art. Ibim, hi. Welcome to Canvas, Niger Delta Roundtable.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Not very often that at the start of a conversation I shake my guest's hands, but allow me the pleasure of doing that this time.
Sure.
It's been remarkable. I've been privileged to see your work up close and to interact with you up close as well.
Yeah.
And not only is your work captivating, inspiring, and challenges one's consciousness, but even your personality as well is quite endearing and I must say intriguing at the same time. And that's why I'm really pleased that eventually we're able to arrange this and you're here today.
Sure.
It's great to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
And I remember while we were recording, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but before we started recording, we were having a conversation earlier on, and Donald was in that conversation also. Something about you leaving us.
Yeah. Well, I'm not leaving per se.
Yes.
I feel like I have to broaden the scope of the work I'm doing. I have to be able to learn new skills. For example, I have a background in architecture, not in art, even though I'm an artist. So I would like to expand that background to be able to gather new skills and stuff to help me tell the narrative and the story of the Niger Delta even better. So I want to leave for a bit and then come back and expand on the work I'm doing around the Niger Delta.
There is no doubt that Nigeria has some of the brightest and most intelligent people in a vast array of fields. And that's a very good thing.
Yeah.
However, one seemingly troubling part of it all is ever so often you have Nigerians with inherent skills here having to leave Nigeria, go overseas, like you said, improve, enhance, broaden, come back. Is that necessarily a good thing? That Nigeria doesn't seem to be fertile enough to improve, expand, all of that. Is it a good thing?
So it's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's just that we have certain limitations as a developing country where it feels like you're a diamond in the desert. You need to be able to be honed and be refined. And you can only do that under certain infrastructure or under sort of like certain facilities that will be available to you more in a developed country or in a first world country. And then you're able to now return and then use whatever knowledge or skills you've gathered to be able to impact in the local scene here in Nigeria.
All right, great. Let's delve into the conversation now proper.
Sure.
What inspired or what inspired the journey into the world of art? And specifically, the chosen medium. Your voice, what shaped that as well?
So growing up in Port Harcourt, I have always loved drawing. I started with comics. I would make comics about, the Niger Delta and Port Harcourt where I grew up. And it was quite interesting growing up in Port Harcourt because this city has different flavors. You get, on the outside it's calm, but inside certain areas it's chaotic. It's beautiful, but at the same time, certain places are rough. So just having to be able to make arts, that blends different kinds of lives and livelihood in the city has inspired me. But my particular medium was inspired because growing up, Port Harcourt wasn't really a city known for art. So pencil, charcoal, these were like the very accessible mediums that I could find around me. And that was how I started developing my craft, and using these mediums, which is also paper and the rest of them, helped me to express myself in an easier fashion before I then developed into other mediums.
All right. You say your background is architecture.
Yeah.
So one would think that you would be more focused on landscapes, on buildings and structures, on angles and all of that. How did that fit into what you're doing right now? Or how did that aid, if you will, what you're doing right now?
So one of the major components of architecture that helps me in my art is that architecture helps me look at my art in three ways, which is function, form, functionality. And then the aesthetically part of the architecture and the arts now meets. This helps me in my work in such a way that I view my work as layers of memory, history, and identity, in the sense that the aesthetical part of the art brings you into the art. And you look at it and you say, oh, this is such a skilled painting. How is this person able to achieve this level of detail or this level of work? And then when you interact with that form of creativity, you now start asking questions. Okay, what's this painting about? How does it function in our society or in this space? You get, and also how does it push this narrative, or how do we now have conversations around the painting as to what it is? So architecture helps me see paintings or see my art installations as sort of like a space for expression when it comes to memory and identity.
Is this a niche space in terms of the appreciation of it? Because, I hear people like you, and I mean people like you in a very good way, talk about art and expression and appreciation for it. Does everyone have the capacity to appreciate art the way you just described? Or is it niche? Is it only, meant for a certain class or groupings of persons?
So I would say two things: that everyone has the capacity to appreciate art, but in terms of the kind of work I do and the kind of work people like me do, we would require a certain level of, either intellect or education for certain people to be able to relate to the kind of art. And it's not even in a bad way. It's just that, especially in a developing country like Nigeria, we are more focused on the basic necessities of life, which is clothing, food, and shelter. You get, so art is considered more like a luxury than actually like a necessity in our everyday life. You get, but to people who have conquered those basic necessities, or to people who are naturally driven by beauty and function and culture, they become more drawn to this kind of art or this kind of pieces. So it can be both in a niche way, and it can also be broadened.
So say I've not been able to satisfy my most basic needs, and I am, for example, from Opobo, and we will get to that in a moment, vis-a-vis your connection with Jaja and your artwork and all of that. Does it mean that I cannot appreciate your work and just see it? And appreciation here does not mean the ability to acquire, which of course the economic, power comes in. But can I see it and say, wow, this is lovely, and then identify with it, or it resonates with me, or I'm able to draw some inspiration or interpretation from what I see.
Yeah. No. You certainly can. You certainly can. When it comes to the appreciation of art, everyone can appreciate art. Everyone can see an artwork and be like, you know what, this resonates with me. You get, because art is also like a reflection of who we are in the society. It's like us looking at a mirror and seeing ourselves from the lens or from the expression of someone else who can visually express that thing. So everyone can do that. When it comes to, what I said about sort of like how education and social classes interact with the art world, I'm simply referring to the spaces in which this art is experienced. For example, an artist like myself and some other artists like me, it's hard to come by the kind of works we do. You mostly have to be in certain spaces like galleries or museums and stuff, and only people who have, a certain level of maybe conquered, like you said, some level of basic necessities are more likely to interact with those kind of spaces, as opposed to maybe if you were an artist that's doing like mural work or an art that is readily like made public at an instance. You get?
Now, I couldn't help but remember that earlier you talked about when you're describing your background and your growing up years and how you discovered your voice in the art world, how that used to do comics. Now, interestingly, when I was growing up, I had classmates, I had friends who also, maybe kind of like yourself, had a thing for art as well. But the kind of comics they drew then were the DC characters, Marvel characters. Very popular was, replicas doing drawings of Superman that we saw in comics, and Spider-Man, and the likes of it. But you talked about doing comics that reflected Niger Delta, River State, Port Harcourt. How, especially what I presume was at a young age, and you weren't doing comics or drawing comics or replicas or Superman and Spider-Man, but of what you saw around you. How did that work?
So I obviously we start with what we know. So I started with, the DC comics and the rest of them. And then I started delving into Greek mythology, which was quite popular when I was growing up, with Hercules and Thor and, these gods. And then I started asking myself certain questions, like what we have in like the Niger Delta and stuff like that. And then I started like looking at historical figures and setting people in like the Niger Delta story, like them Ken Saro-Wiwas and the rest of them. So I would sort of like just oppose, their own like body ways, the way I understood it with the characters, that I would have gotten from certain DC comics by just giving them like muzzles and capes and the rest of them. So that was how my art started transitioning. But then at some point, I got interested in portraiture. And then I moved into portraiture and understanding like the human face and figures and all that stuff before I now circled back into, the Niger Delta again after gaining all the necessary skills I had needed.
Do you have some of those early scribblings or doodles of yours, if I may use that term, from back then? Do you still have them now?
I would have to check. I don't have a lot of them because then I'm not sure I was into record keeping.
Also, I must ask this. Were you, at that time, in your formative years, did you have your basic needs met? And was that how you were able to think about doodling or scribbling or doing, artwork on DC and Superman and Kobe, and then Ken Saro-Wiwa and others and giving them capes and muscles? Were you okay?
So I grew up in like a middle class family. So I would say I had like my basic needs met, because I would also say even the school I went to, was sort of like a Montessori. So there were certain art classes, leadership development courses, certain things other than the normal academic curriculum that helped me foster, just the knowledge and being able to gather the skills around. Even right in secondary school, everyone knew I was going to be an artist, even before I knew. You get? So just being in that kind of school and that kind of environment and having those needs met sort of like helped me foster, developing my skills, yeah.
The debut solo exhibition was on King Jaja of Opobo.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So I've always been interested in historical figures, like I said, but a bunch of things had made me not go to Opobo, my hometown, in quite a while. But in 2023, I had some of my cousins who were coming into the country from, different parts of the world, Canada and the rest. And they said, oh, you know what, let's go home and experience this thing. And I said, okay, sure. So I went there and just experienced in December in Opobo. It's reignited my love for the Niger Delta and how much our stories are alien to certain parts of the world, and then I said, I need to tell this story. And for me to tell this story, I need to start from the roots. Opobo has existed for 150 years. So I felt like I needed to tell this story, and not on the surface level of just telling the story. I need to trace, the origin of how this all began. And I had the idea for King Jaja, which, by the way, nobody believed in, but surprisingly, we are here today.
When you say nobody believed in, what do you mean?
Yeah, when I had the idea for King Jaja, I had galleries that I was already working with. I had shows I was already doing with different galleries in different parts of the world. And I said, I wanted to do a show about King Jaja. And they said, oh, you know what? This story is quite unique to you. We don't know how our collector base will react. You already have like a kind of work which I was making, like certain portraits of people in my local community still in Port Harcourt, but adorned with like flowers and a lot of ornamental stuff, which was quite successful in like the international market. And they said, oh, this is such a shift from what you're already doing, because you are doing like these figure paintings. How do you now move to storytelling? You get? And they said, oh, it's such a risky venture to take on, especially for a solo exhibition of just your works, because you're going to have 10, 11 paintings of just King Jaja. How will people interact with it? But I said, you know what? Art is going to tell the story. And this story is not just unique to Opobo or the Niger Delta. Most regions in Africa, even the Ashanti regions, and even Morocco, a lot of them, they have similarities with this story. So different cultures across Africa and the world would tap from this story and see the light. So yeah.
There are different art forms, one of which is literature.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of telling a story, it's immediately obvious how a piece of literature can tell a story. After all, literature in itself is storytelling.
Yeah.
But you have pages, you have words, whether verbal or in print, you can tell a story. How does one painting or one portrait, one canvas, how does that tell a story?
So like they say, an image, tells the story of 1,000 words. You get? And it's quite interesting because we are in a generation where a lot of people have short attention spans. So I basically saw myself like, I need to do the work and then translate it in such a way whereby this information or this story is easily, consumed without having to read it 1,000 words to be able to get it. But for me to do that, I had to read the 1,000 words on behalf of the people that would be, interacting with the painting.
Yeah.
So, and it was quite interesting because I then before my show, I spent about 7 months on research. I read journals about the Niger Delta. I read books about King Jaja. One of the most prominent one was a book called The King of the Niger Delta, The Life and Times of King Jaja. And this was also written coincidentally by my uncle.
Wow.
Professor S.J.S. Cookey. He's in his 90s. He was the second vice chancellor of University of Port Harcourt. And he's currently professor of history. So I read that book and I sort of like used that book to say, okay, this is how I'm going to break down this painting. This is how I'm going to explore these stories and tell these stories with this body of work.
You mentioned how that even galleries were,
skeptical.
They were skeptical. And that for me, I'm not in the art world, and I'm no expert. However, it strikes me as shocking somewhat, because you were saying that, I would think that the art world is possibly one of the most open, to new ideas, new opportunities, new styles, new forms of storytelling and all of that. How did that hit you, that even your world, the world of art, was skeptical as to this new form or this new story that you were trying to tell?
Yeah. So for me, at first I also approached the gallery mindset with the level of optimism you have for the openness. But at some point I realized that it was also a business model, because if a gallery is doing a show, they're going to spend a couple of thousands of dollars and they have to make their money back. You get, in some way. So which means that the paintings have to be something that they are confident in selling. And considering the fact that they felt like the story was niche to a certain region in Nigeria, taking it abroad or even within Nigeria to another space when you don't know how people would connect to it or if people were willing to spend on those paintings was quite the challenge for them. But being the kind of person that I am, I usually do not take no for an answer. And for me, I guess because of, my background in architecture and some other things that I do, I was confident that irrespective of the money, I wanted to tell this story. And I didn't care whether anyone believed that it would sell or not. I would find a way to make it work, and this was how the whole idea came about.
I think relevance is key for any form of art. Once again, whether it's literature or your art form, relevance is very key, and how it relates with current realities. So what does the story of King Jaja mean to you personally? And speaking of relevance, does it have any relevance to the Niger Delta even today?
Yeah, so for me, the story of King Jaja is very personal to me. It's a story of identity. I have experienced a lot of, would I say, identity misinterpretation in certain areas. When you say you are from, especially Opobo in the Niger Delta, people will argue whether you're Igbo. People will argue whether you're truly Ijo. Sometimes you walk into spaces and your name is quite different. People say, oh, Ibim Cookey. And then they're like, oh, where are you from? Like, what's going on here? Because to some people, they think we're a minority. But we are not a minority. We are a majority. It's just that we are not as loud as most minorities. You get? So that story and exploring that was not just personal for me in terms of culture and identity. It was personal for me in terms of understanding my roots and, truly finding out why these stories were relegated to the backgrounds and why they're not being told. But in the general context, the story was quite important because it was a story of resilience. It was a story of, finding and understanding the political climate of the Niger Delta and why we are where we are today, and also the challenges that we have today. It was also a story that spoke about truly fighting for what we believed in, because King Jaja fought to be able to retain the trade of palm oil in Opobo and in the Niger Delta against the British influence. He also fought in giving the Niger Delta the ability for us to be able to rule ourselves. And he faced the struggles even with the chiefs he brought from Bonny Kingdom and forming the 67 volcano houses, which were also triumphant in their own right and which still exist today after 150 years. So these are some of the challenges that we currently face in the Niger Delta, maintaining a system of political climate or political environment that works for us, preserves the peace, let us, rule ourselves, and at the same time develop at a kind of pace we want to develop without external influence. And in this case, the external influence would even be the federal level of governance. And this was why this story was really important to me.
Now, not just for you, but on a somewhat general scale, why is finding and understanding one's identity very important, Sin?
It's very important because they said, if you don't know your past, you can't know your present and you can't predict your future. So understanding the past and, just King Jaja's tussle with not just the Niger Delta, but also with the British people would enable us to understand sort of like how our relationship and our development as a people, has affected the current struggles we have today for resources, power, and also our relationship with other parts of Nigeria and the world, and also where we are going in terms of building ourselves at the Niger Delta as a region that is plagued with a certain reputation of crisis and violence and, fight for resources. So that's why it's quite important to get that story out.
How do you see your work influencing the reclamation of suppressed or even outrightly forgotten histories?
I see my work as quite important because just speaking from even my debut solo exhibition and the showcase I just had at the TEDx Port Harcourt, my work is bringing to attention certain issues and certain stories about our past that even though some of it has been taught in our schools, but it has not really been expanded and people have not really, taken a deep look into it to say, okay, these people who are, clamoring for certain things being brought to the region or certain development and, changing their political climate and stuff, how did they start? What systems worked for them in the past? And how different are this system from what we have today? And how can we say, okay, the past and the present can marry together to forge like a better future for not just the youths in the Niger Delta, but also to preserve their environment, to protect their resources, and also to develop in such a way that they are still maintaining their culture and heritage while developing and expanding to accommodate whatever it is that the outside world is bringing.
Yeah, I find even myself, while preparing for this, and after seeing your work at the last TEDx Port Harcourt event, even I was good. And I know I read about him in secondary school and learned. I found myself Googling it all over again. Jaja of Opobo and the story and all of that, and learning anew things that I may have known before and even very likely or definitely even forgot. Do you consider your artwork a form of resistance?
So I would say it's a form of resistance, but not in a loud way of activism. It's a form of resistance in terms of changing the perception. For example, one of the works in my solo exhibition has been collected by the British government to the Commonwealth collection of King Charles. And that particular work is called The King's Storyboard. And it comprises of, the story within King Jaja and the Niger Delta and the British people. And they collected that work because it's sort of like, it's a reminder of our shared history and the challenges we face together and where the relationship is at right now. That even though we are not even coming at a level playing field, we are having certain conversations and sitting on certain tables that a couple of years ago we wouldn't have sat at. You understand? So I think my work is there not to, sort of like in a loud way of activism, but to create that perception. And that perception, once you create, like you said, the work made you to start Googling King Jaja. Once people are now, conversant with these conversations, they are now asking the right questions. They're now saying, okay, you know what? How do we fix these issues that still remain today in the Niger Delta? It now forces people to look at the conversation in a different light than how it has been looked at before, that has made the conversation forgotten or gone obsolete.
It is Canvas and Niger Delta Roundtable brought to you by Reimagines Africa Energy Company Limited. We're discussing the art of reclaiming the Niger Delta. Our guest is world-renowned artist Ibim Cookey. We go for a break. We'll return shortly. The conversation will continue. Please stay with us.
In the heart of our journey, where the sun touches the earth and the wind whispers through the trees, a new chapter unfolds. A chapter where energy illuminates more than just bulbs. It lights up minds. A chapter of unity, a coming together with a common goal to energize futures and illuminating lives. In classrooms, young dreams evolve, inspired by the promise of a brighter tomorrow fueled by available energy. Small businesses flourish, becoming seeds of prosperity. Energy that empowers and is catalyst for growth and change. The future is energy. So, let's light up the path to a sustainable future together. Energy for you, me, and the world at large. Energy for people and planet. We are Renaissance.
Welcome back. Still Canvas, the Niger Delta Roundtable brought to you by Renaissance, and I have the pleasure of discussing today reclaiming the Niger Delta, or the art of reclaiming the Niger Delta. Ibim Cookey, so Ibim, great to have you here once again.
Great to be here, thank you.
How does can I call you a Port Harcourt boy?
Yeah, I'm a Port Harcourt boy.
Great. How does a Port Harcourt boy from Opobo become, how do you go from being a Port Harcourt boy to becoming an international sensation? How does that even happen?
It's quite an interesting journey because I didn't see the journey going like this. I just started doing what I loved. And I think I had my first big break in 2016 when I was in architecture school. When some of my works went viral on the internet. And, that got me my first ever exhibition in Johannesburg. And I went to Johannesburg and that opened my mind to the possibilities of the art world. And then I got back to Nigeria and I said, you know what, I needed to do this. And I started growing from there. And after that, I, delved into some paintings and I started refining my craft to meet international standards. And then I was awarded the most artistic personality in Nigeria, Nigerian Teen's Choice Award. And after that, I was given the Garden City Advancement Award and made the Art Ambassador to Ministry of Culture and Tourism. And after that, I was given a special recognition award by the federal government, Nigerian Festival of Awards in Sheraton, Abuja. And I sort of like dabbled between art and architecture for a while. But then I discovered that I needed more. And having an architectural background, I needed to intern under someone who understood the balance between art and architecture. And you can imagine a young boy of, 21, 22. I left Port Harcourt and went to Ibim Cookey, which was a village in Delta State, or is a village in Delta State. And that's the home of the world-renowned Ibim Cookey, who is also in his 90s now, and he's a pioneer for passive traditional architecture and also art. And just being with Ibim Cookey for a year and working with him on architecture and art exposed my mind to the business of art and architecture. And while with Dimas, I still made works that, spoke about not just the Delta, but broadened the scope to Black people and identity and culture. And this also helped me go viral again on the internet in 2020 when we had, the George Floyd situation worldwide, and then there was a clamor for Black art. And after that, I now shifted my focus into, instead of these broader stories, why don't I niche it down a bit and focus on, my immediate environment? And this is how we are where we are today.
You talk about a period in your life when you were 21, and I'm amazed at the things that you were thinking, the things that you were focused on, and what you were devoting your time to at 21. What was it like? I mean, how did you do that? And more importantly, how did your contemporaries, friends maybe, who were also 21 at the time, how did that work out for you?
So there's something about having a vision for your life. I feel like life is being viewed from a certain lens. It's like if you hold a camera, you're the person taking the picture, only you can see from that lens. Every other person sees the picture when it's taken. So being a young person at that age and picking up your bags and going to a village in Delta State to go and work with a man that is probably like 86, 87 years, people are going to wonder, like, are you mad? Why are you living the comfort, But Dimas was somebody that you can imagine, an artist who his work currently sells for about $1 million. And he sold his first work when he was 50. He's done everything. He's contested for presidency. He's been awarded the Officer of the Order of the Niger. He's building the Dominican Chapel Ibadan. He's currently ranked 7th most iconic places of worship in the 20th century. So this is the kind of person that I felt like I needed to learn from.
That's the problem then. Now, how does a 21-year-old have that level of foresight and introspection and deepness and every other term you can think? I mean, what influences that? Is it just you and any other 21-year-old who doesn't think that way? Something's wrong with that person? How does that even happen?
So I don't think it's just me. I think we are a few people who think like that.
Few, exactly.
Yeah. But for me personally, it was, just knowing that my environment and where I was, like, something needed to change. You understand? Because I grew up, again, like in Port Harcourt, and I noticed, that a lot of the young people around me, they were not thinking in that direction. And I guess also family also matters a lot, because my mom is a scholar. She's an academia. She's a professor of chemistry. So just seeing that level of discipline and drive also got me thinking, I needed to think in a different direction. And then when I was very observant of my environment and what was needed for my environment, I knew that I did not possess enough skill. I may have had the talent as at then, but I did not possess enough skill and intellect to scale up. And I told myself, I would sacrifice 1 year with this person to be able to scale up so I can make good use of what I have here.
You described when you were coming up with the Jaja of Opobo exhibition, and the galleries were skeptical.
Yeah.
So they would have preferred at the time something that was, maybe more beautiful, something more contemporary, something easier to the eye, and that they seemed more certain would sell. So how do you combine beauty with, and you described your work as not being purely or solely in the realm of activism. However, I think in some sense, one might describe it as such, in some sense, but definitely conscious.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Conscious?
Yeah, definitely conscious.
So how do you combine beauty with conscious, if you don't like the word activism, but conscious in your work?
Yeah. So for me, I would say, again, just tapping from architecture roots where you have function, aesthetics, and then you have form. So beauty for me draws the attention of people to the work, because most people would likely be drawn to something that is beautiful as opposed to ugly. Even though ugly is highly contextual, but the beauty and the skill is to gather people's attention, and then that now makes people want to have a conversation to say, okay, you know what? I'm sitting with this work in front of me, and while I'm appreciating what the artist has done, I need to know, the story behind the work and what the work is about. And that was how I was able to say, okay, I needed to find a balance between aesthetics and passing the message. And coincidentally, it was quite unique because the story of Jaja doesn't exist in image form anywhere, because this was something that happened in the 1800s. So translating that to the reality and being able to, convert the stories to storytelling from my imagination was quite like an interesting piece to work on, because you can imagine like the set you saw in the exhibition in TEDx, being able to relive that memory and give people the nostalgia of understanding what happened over 150 years ago in 2025 is quite an interesting perspective to view art from, which is one of the things that art does and one of the beauty art has. Art sort of like reminds us of the past, tells us of the present, and then asks questions of the future.
What roles and how critical do you think the roles are that artists play in challenging dominant narratives that could be negative and shaping new discussions and shaping new consciousness?
So I think artists play quite a very interesting role and a very important role in these things, because it's easy to focus on headlines or news as opposed to being able to capture the expressions that art can capture, whether it's in painting, whether it's in literature, whether it's in music. What art does is that art shows us a reflection of our society and ourselves, and shows us how to reshape like these things as we go along the way in timelines. There's a conversation that says that the world changes every 25 years, and if you look at art in the broader spectrum, you can see that in these 25 years, you've had artists, you have had writers, you've had painters, you've had, people involved in the creative space who have mirrored and who have either predicted these things or sort of like preserved these changes along the line. And I think focusing on this helps us, reshape to say, okay, what are we doing now and how can it be better, and make policies that sort of like make sure that we preserve these things and also change these narratives moving forward.
Your works have been exhibited from Lagos to Miami to Athens. How have these platforms helped in telling the Niger Delta story?
Oh, yes, they have. They have. They totally have. Because every day I see, people. In fact, yesterday, someone in Portugal sent me a DM and said, oh, this King Jaja, like, I've heard about it, and I've heard about Lagos, because there's also a place in Portugal called Lagos, and Lagos was named after. So it's helped people know about not just the Niger Delta, but have seen that the human race in general is some way and in some form is connected. We are all like a product of different segmented parts of memory, history, and cultures. So people hearing about the Niger Delta and seeing about the Niger Delta, for some people, it's telling them, okay, you know what, I need to come and experience this. For some people, it's saying, I need to know more about this. For some people, it's saying, okay, what's different from what it is now in the Niger Delta? But most importantly, it changes the perception people have of the Niger Delta, because it's easy for people to see the headlines of violence or chaos or crisis or fight for resources. But these particular conversations help them see the Niger Delta in a different light and say, okay, you know what? Like, there's something happening here. There's something that these people are clamoring for. There's something that makes sense to these people. And we'll have to understand their history for us to be able to, meet them at a certain point where we can have these conversations with them and see where they're coming from, as opposed to, staying in the comfort of whatever regions we are and try to negotiate for resources or try to negotiate for the development of the Niger Delta without experiencing, what these people are experiencing in their region.
Talking about the international community's appreciation for artwork, and specifically your artwork, you described a while ago how that, one of your pieces has been
collected by the British government. Yeah.
Exactly, by the British government. You mentioned King Charles in that mix as well.
Yeah, the Commonwealth collection of King Charles.
Precisely. The history is rife, and we can't forget in a hurry. There's still lots of talk about what colonialism did to Africa, to Nigeria, and the theft of artifacts, artworks from Nigeria. We're still having ongoing conversations about the return of some of those these artifacts and artworks. Are you concerned by that? Are you concerned as to the kinds of narratives that could engender at the British government or King Charles, the monarchy, is associated with the collection of your artwork? Does that strike a positive or negative chord?
So for me, it strikes a positive chord because one of the major things I'm trying to do with my artwork and with the body of work I'm doing is for these conversations to be had at the right places. You get, and for this kind of work to be in that particular kind of collection, and leveraging on the shared history we have and the roles they played in King Jaja's story and dilemma.
Exactly.
It confronts them constantly with the fact that this was the role you played in this situation. And right now in 2025, 100 and something years later, these conversations have to be different. We can't continue like this. We have seen like the mistakes you've made in the past, the cruelty that has happened in the past. Right now, we have to have a different conversation. We have to come to a different table and have these conversations and the solutions for, our people moving forward. Because even till today, the British people still have some sort of stake in Nigeria and in our resources and how our resources are being managed and shared, even though colonialism is no longer in place. So it's quite important that this work that have this kind of stories are, not ending in my studio or not ending just in the Delta, but in spaces where other people from different walks of life and different regions and different continents can look at it and say, you know what, I want to know more about the story and I want to have more conversations about what happened at that particular time and what has changed where we are currently now.
Can art influence development policies in the Niger Delta and enhance conversations in the civic space? And not just can it, is it doing that even in your experience?
Yes, it's doing that. And it certainly can, because there's something about perception that art does to people. When people see art and see the expressions that art has to offer, it informs certain policies and certain changes that they can make. When it comes to museums, it comes to galleries, it comes to preserving our culture, our identity, even when it comes to ceremonies and the things we have in certain regions. For example, in Opobo now, we have a King Jaja Monument Center, and they're trying to also build a King Jaja Museum and things like that. So this culture sort of like helps us know ourselves better, know our identity better, know our culture better. And then the policies we make around this and the way we develop is no longer tailored towards the development of the West or what development work for different regions, but what development work for us while we are still preserving our own identity, culture. And you can see that even in architecture. You understand? Certain parts of Nigeria, have strayed away from the concept of what our identity for building and comfort is, especially in a region like ours that is tropical and not temperate. You understand? So art sort of like reshapes these conversations and help those in positions to make this policy see a reason why there needs to be a policy change to fit the culture and identity of the people from a particular region.
No doubt. I'm quite certain that there are a number of other talented artists, young artists in the Niger Delta who need an opportunity and a space to flourish, to thrive and tell their stories also. But they require some support. What kind of support do you think is required for these upcoming artists and even those who are trying to find themselves? What support do they need to thrive, to showcase their work, tell their stories as well?
So I think a couple of things would be needed for us to support artists, especially in this region. One will be funding, because like they said, those with ideas don't have the resources and those with the resources mostly don't have the ideas. So funding will be an essential part to be able to let artists express themselves. Artists can't express themselves if they're constantly bothered about, like we said earlier, there are basic needs being met. You understand? And certain projects needs to be funded so that the artists can fully express their ideas. One other thing that's quite important is also the platforms to be able to showcase this work. Particularly in a region like Port Harcourt and in the Niger Delta, we have limited availability of media outlets and media spaces. We have limited availability of, showcases, let's say in museums. We have limited museums, limited galleries, that can help these artists be in environments where they can show their works and the way it's supposed to be shown to pass the message it's supposed to pass. But most importantly, we need an enabling environment to be able to allow private investors to come, because most of all these projects can't be funded by the government. You need to have an enabling environment that is safe, that is investor friendly, to be able to allow private investors to come and say, okay, you know what, we feel safe, we feel confident that we can come here, invest our money, and it would yield profit and dividends, irrespective of whatever political climate or whatever situation is going on with resources in the state. And I think if that is done, creatives will have the ability to make works and also grow and showcase their works in the right way.
You described earlier in the conversation how that economic stability is key, even to the appreciation of art as well.
Yeah.
Being able to be in that space where works are being showcased, or whether you can even showcase your work at all, means that certain needs have been met. In a society that's deemed, at one time at least, the poverty capital of the world. How do you think that we can accomplish this?
So I think the best way to accomplish it is to make art, which is why, not just private investment, but also government investment is quite important. We need to make art that reaches people at the point of their societal status and also needs. So while it's nice to make paintings and hang in galleries and museums and art fairs, there are public arts, like arts in our public spaces, on our walls, in our communities, arts that try for community engagement. You get wearable art. Art is so diverse that it can translate in multiple fronts and multiple funds. So if there's enough resources, there are enough platforms, even when the needs are not being met, people can interact with this art or experience this art from the comfort of their environment or their community, which is directly engaging them every day, as opposed to waiting to view them in museums or galleries when they are, hung in a particular kind of lightning and slapped, prices of $10,000 and stuff. So that's what I believe.
You've been to different continents, different countries. You've been to Greece, you've been to the US, you've been to South Africa, you've been to other countries as well. Are you one in a million, or does art really have the potential to change a person's life that way? So there might be one young boy in a chair right now who is scribbling, who's doing stuff. And is listening to this right now. Does it have that potential? Or is it just a 1 in a billion chance?
It's not 1 in a billion chance. I believe that art has the potential to change the life of every artist and every creative, and the creative themselves also have to believe. But this is not like some aspire to inspire thing. The fact remains that you have to find your unique voice. You have to find a voice that's unique. It's easy for me to, come on a podcast and talk about King Jaja or the Niger Delta for 5-6 hours, because it's a story that's unique to me. It's a story that is personal to me. It's a voice that I enjoy having and expressing. You can't be anyone else. Every other person has been taken. So if you find a story and a unique voice to you, don't bother about, how people will receive it or what they'll perceive. Those that will connect to it will connect to your art. It's not meant for everybody. It's meant for certain people that want to connect to it. And when it's exposed to everybody, those people that will connect to it will connect to it. So art has the possibility of changing the life of every young person. Yes.
Creatively, what's next for you? Are there other historical forms or themes that you're exploring, or is it still Jaja?
No. So King Jaja is just a starting point. I'm telling the story of the Niger Delta with the starting point of King Jaja. So my next project I have a show coming up in the US in January. But after that, I'm working on an art installation, that is going to talk about Area House. So Area House is a project that explores the initiation rites of womanhood in the Niger Delta. In most of the Niger Delta stories we tell today, the women have sort of like been relegated to the background. And it's not even that it's intentional. It's just that they have been more focused on the turmoils, the tribulations, and certain things that have happened that have gotten us to where we are today. And the roles of women haven't really been spoken about. So Area House is sort of like an installation of both paintings and sculptures that tell that story of the initiation rites from the childhood stage of a woman to the childbearing age, where they are now able to participate in, these political activities and have these conversations on a broader scale. And this tradition has been passed down from generation to generation, even up to today. And it's common in Opobo, Boni, Kalabari, or Krika, and just, a bunch of regions in the Niger Delta. And that's installation is what I'm exploring next.
And how are the galleries responding to this?
No, they're responding very well to it because now they've seen the possibilities of the story and how much people connect to it. And this particular story of Area House is common in other cultures. It's just that it's called something different. So, yeah.
But of course, that happened because you stuck to your guns with King Jaja, yes. And you said, no, this is what I want to do.
Yes, definitely.
And now they believe in you.
Yes, definitely.
Right. Once again, to that young boy in Opobo, in Eche, in wherever within the Niger Delta, wherever in Nigeria, whether watching this podcast, even outside the world, right? Outside Nigeria, part of anywhere in the world, who is an aspiring artist and is wondering, do I go ahead with this? Nobody believes in me. I'd rather, maybe I should be playing outside someplace instead of going to learn at some 80-something-year-old man at his feet.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to them?
One thing I would say to them is one of the major challenges we have, which I don't want it to be a limitation to them, is that we think we're a product of our environment. But right now, the world is a global village. With your phone, you can connect with anyone, anywhere in the world right now. So to that young boy that's thinking, I'm in Eche,
or young girl.
Yeah, or young girl that's thinking, I'm in Eche, I'm in Abonima, I'm in this place. There are no galleries here. There's no painting. There's no this happening. There's no art market. Start with what you have from where you are. Start without knowing what your next step is. Start without knowing who will show the work. Start without knowing who will buy the work, and just put in the work and keep putting yourself out there. And the universe would align, the stars to your favor. People are yearning for new voices every day. People are yearning for new things to connect to every day. Every other person is taking. You have to be the most authentic self you are and do what you can from where you are. And that's the only way you can grow from there.
It is Canvas in Niger Delta Roundtable brought to you by Reimagines. The art of reclaiming the Niger Delta is the topic of this episode. It's been my great pleasure discussing and recording this episode with Ibim Cookey, a world-renowned artist from Opobo, from Outer Port Harcourt here in Rivers State. Ibim, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for the great work you're putting out there, and wish you all the best with your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But that's it. Remember, to that young person, that young girl out there, keep putting the work into it, regardless of who might buy or not appreciate. Like Ibim said, it's a global village now. Keep putting in the effort, and the stars will align. I'm Dayo Lishakin. Thanks for watching this episode. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.